Hey, top drivers, in this video, we're going to break down how camber and tire pressures work in Automobilista 2. The goal? Figuring out how to fine-tune them for maximum tire performance and better driving feel. As we discussed in a previous video, Automobilista 2 features an incredibly advanced and detailed tire model, with multiple variables to consider. This becomes even more crucial given the vast range of cars and categories available in RESA Studio Sim. At the end of the day, we all know that tires are the only point of contact between the car and the asphalt, making them one of the most critical performance factors in motorsport. You can have the most powerful engine, the most refined aerodynamics, and a perfectly balanced chassis, but without proper tire management, all that potential goes to waste. A race car's ability to generate grip, stay stable through corners, and put power down efficiently all depends on how the tires interact with the track. This is influenced by several factors: inflation pressure, temperature, camber, toe, and even how the driver pushes the tires over a lap. Dialing in the tires properly is what separates a decent setup from a truly competitive one. And this holds true not just in the real world, but also in Automobilista 2, where the developers have put a huge amount of time and resources into creating a highly detailed, convincing, and realistic tire model. The key to tire tuning is maximizing what's known as the contact patch, the area where the tire meets the track surface. This is where all the traction force is generated, and ultimately, where the car's grip comes from. Saying the contact patch is important would be an understatement. If it's not optimized, performance will suffer, preventing the driver from fully exploiting the car's potential. And that's exactly where camber and tire pressures come into play. By adjusting these parameters, we can fine-tune the contact patch to find the best balance between grip, tire wear, and lap time performance. To really understand how these settings impact our tires, we need to remember that tires aren't static components. They're highly dynamic, constantly deforming under the car's movements, slip angles, and lateral and longitudinal forces. That's why it's crucial to monitor how the tire deforms within the contact patch while driving and find the best compromise to ensure maximum grip throughout the entire lap. But how do we actually measure and optimize this contact area? Motorsport engineers have long sought a way to gather data on the contact patch, knowing that if they could track its behavior through each corner and over a full lap, they'd gain a highly detailed understanding of how the tire performs under load. However, directly measuring the contact patch is far from simple. As we mentioned earlier, it's constantly shifting and experiencing rapid changes, making real-time accurate data collection extremely complex. In recent years, advanced sensor technology has been developed to directly measure tire slip and deformation, but these systems are highly sophisticated and often extremely expensive. Fortunately, there's a more accessible and widely used method for analyzing contact patch behavior: tire temperature analysis. One of the key aspects of tire performance is that temperature is directly linked to the area under the slip curve. Essentially, the amount of work the tire does to generate lateral grip. In other words, the heat buildup within the tire gives us a direct indication of how the contact patch is interacting with the asphalt. So if we can precisely measure tire temperatures, we can determine how much energy, heat, is being transferred through the rubber at different points of the tread and assess whether the contact patch is working optimally or if adjustments are needed in the car's setup. Since tire temperatures provide a clear indicator of contact patch behavior on track, the IMO method, inside, middle, outside, becomes an essential tool for refining the car's setup and maximizing grip. This method involves using a pyrometer to measure temperatures at 3 key points on the tire to assess thermal distribution: inside, inner edge of the tread; middle, center of the tread; outside, outer edge of the tread. The basic idea is that the temperature distribution across the tire width reveals how the tire is working. Hotter areas indicate the sections of the tread that are under the most load during a lap. By analyzing these 3 values, teams can determine whether the load on the tire is evenly distributed or unbalanced, helping them assess whether inflation pressure and camber settings are optimal. In practice, optimizing the contact patch and overall tire performance requires accurately measuring temperature across these 3 key sections of the tread: inside, middle, and outside. Now that we've covered the basics, let's take a look at 2 fundamental ways to use the IMO method to fine-tune the car and evaluate potential setup adjustments: camber temperatures, pressure, temperatures, camber temperatures. As we all know, camber angle is the tilt of the wheel relative to the vertical axis when viewed from the front. If the top of the wheel leans inward toward the car, it's called negative camber. If it leans outward, it's positive camber. Race cars always run with negative camber because, in corners, where grip and speed matter most, lateral forces push the car toward the outside of the turn. Negative camber helps keep the tire's contact patch as flat as possible against the asphalt, evenly distributing the load and maximizing grip. Without negative camber, the tire would lean too much on its outer edge, reducing grip and causing uneven tread wear. Ideally, tire temperature should gradually decrease from the inner edge to the outer edge, with moderate differences, a few degrees, and the middle temperature sitting roughly between the inner and outer readings. If this balance is achieved, it means the tire is working evenly across its surface, signaling a well-optimized setup. On the other hand, temperature imbalances between the inner, middle, and outer sections indicate that adjustments are needed. For example, if the inner edge of the tire is significantly hotter than the outer edge, it means the tire is leaning too much on the inside, too much negative camber, reducing the effectiveness of the contact patch. If the outer edge is overheating, there's too little negative camber, causing the tire to roll too much onto its outer edge in corners. This reduces optimal grip and accelerates wear on the outer shoulder. Pressure temperatures. The same IMO method principles can also be applied to check if tire pressures are correctly set using pressure temperatures. Let's consider three common inflation scenarios: underinflated, overinflated, properly inflated. If a tire is underinflated, the inner and outer edges will be more in contact with the road than the center, leading to a U-shaped temperature profile. If a tire is overinflated, the opposite happens. The tire will make less contact on the inner and outer edges, with the contact patch concentrated mainly in the center. Understanding these patterns is key to fine-tuning pressures and ensuring that the tire works efficiently across its entire tread surface. In a properly inflated tire, the center remains in contact with the road while also engaging a larger portion of the inner and outer edges compared to an overinflated tire. Now, if we think about these three scenarios in terms of energy, meaning heat and temperature, we can visualize the following. If the center temperature is significantly lower than the inner and outer edges, the tire is underinflated. This happens because low pressure causes the tire's shoulders to do most of the work, reducing the center's contact with the track. In this case, the pressure needs to be increased. If the center temperature is too high compared to the edges, the tire is overinflated. This means the tire is bulging at the center, limiting contact with the inner and outer edges. Here, reducing the pressure will help distribute the load more evenly. If the center temperature sits between the readings from the inner and outer edges, the pressures are correctly set. In short, if the center temperature is out of balance with the edges, the issue is in camber, it's inflation pressure. Setting the correct pressure is essential to ensuring that the contact patch is evenly distributed, preventing irregular wear and maximizing grip. In modern motorsport, optimizing tire grip and consistency is critical, and the IMO method has become a key tool for achieving this. It allows teams to fine-tune pressure and camber using objective data rather than relying solely on driver feedback. A properly inflated tire operates at its optimal grip temperature, while well-adjusted camber ensures maximum contact with the track in corners without overloading one side of the tire. Even small variations in tread temperature can have a significant impact on grip. For example, if a tire falls outside its ideal temperature window, it may either lose grip if too cold or become greasy and unpredictable if overheated. The IMO method is one of the cornerstones of race car setup because it gives engineers the ability to quickly assess and fine-tune a car's balance. And Automobilista 2 fully embraces this concept, accurately simulating the importance of tire pressures and camber angles. Before we dive deeper into configuring camber and pressures in AMS2, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our content. Now back to AMS2. In real motorsport, teams use a pyrometer to measure tire temperatures at different points on the tread to analyze thermal distribution. In AMS2, in addition to advanced telemetry available through Motec, the in-game telemetry HUD acts as a live pyrometer, allowing players to monitor tire temperature changes in real time across the inner middle, and outer sections of the tread. In other simulators, we're used to seeing these temperature readings as surface temperatures, but in Automobilista 2, the values used for the IMO method are not surface temperatures because they wouldn't be very useful for setup adjustments. Surface temperatures are highly dynamic, fluctuating by dozens of degrees in an instant within the same corner. Instead, AMS2 provides a reading that's not from the tire carcass either, but from the tread, the actual rubber making contact with the track. This is the part of the tire that wears down and is only a few centimeters thick when new. In real motorsport, pyrometers use a small probe that penetrates just deep enough into the tread to avoid picking up misleading surface readings, but not so deep that it reaches the tire's core. At the start of a session in AMS2, tires can be in various states: stone cold, as in a test day scenario, preheated for the formation lap, like at the start of a race, fully warmed up, ready to go at optimal temperature. These different conditions, along with session weather, mean we need to carefully choose how we approach tire temperature and pressure analysis. For example, with cold tires, the first few laps should be taken gently, avoiding unnecessary pushing to allow temperatures and pressures to build up gradually before analyzing the data. This is the well-known gentle warm-up phase. On the other hand, if tires are already fully heated, we can push hard right away, doing a 5-lap stint to bring pressures to their peak range and immediately check telemetry data. Regarding tire pressures, as in most other simulators, the setup screen in AMS2 shows cold pressures. However, both pressure and temperature can vary significantly depending on the session type and other factors, such as whether tire warmers are allowed based on the series regulations. As for recommended IMO temperature values for camber adjustments in AMS2, front tires, a difference of 5 to 10 degrees Celsius between the inner and outer edge. Rear tires, a difference of 0 to 5 degrees Celsius between the inner and outer edge. It's important to remember that every car is different, especially across various categories. While camber adjustments are always available in the setup, each car has a unique suspension design, which affects how the tire deforms under chassis roll. In other words, how the tire makes contact with the track when the car leans into a corner. Factors like camber gain, center of gravity height, and roll center all influence this behavior. For example, Formula cars should aim for lower IMO values at the rear, around 0 to 3 degrees Celsius, and higher values at the front, 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. GT cars tend to perform well with 5 to 7 degrees Celsius at the front and 3 to 5 degrees Celsius at the rear. These details might seem minor, but they're absolutely critical when fine-tuning tire performance. They also highlight the incredible depth and accuracy that Automobilista 2 delivers. Tire pressures in AMS2. When it comes to tire pressures, AMS2 provides a pressure reading based on internal tire factors, and the IMO method reflects how pressure affects tread distribution. Just like in real motorsport, this means we have all the necessary tools to keep camber and pressures properly dialed in. Balancing temperatures across axes. There's no universal rule for balancing front, rear, and left-right tire temperatures, but there are some general principles to follow. Front versus rear temperature balance. Keeping a close eye on this is crucial, as it directly affects the car's handling characteristics. Left versus right temperature balance. Track layout and direction, clockwise versus counterclockwise, play a big role in how heat builds up in the tires. For example, on tracks like Suzuka, which has an even mix of left and right-hand corners, we can expect a more balanced temperature distribution. On circuits like Barcelona, which has more right-hand turns, the left-side tires will naturally experience more heat buildup. The impact of suspension, stiffness on tire temps. Another key factor in left-right balance is the car's overall stiffness. A stiff setup puts more load on the outside tires, increasing heat and wear. A softer setup distributes load more evenly through corners, reducing temperature differences between the left and right sides. So if we see a big temperature imbalance between the inside and outside tires, but the track has a relatively even number of left and right-hand corners, it could mean the setup is too stiff. Understanding and managing tire temperature distribution is a skill that every driver should master. How temperature variations affect grip, wear, and car balance. Tire temperature fluctuations can have a huge impact on grip, wear, and the car's dynamic balance over a stint. A well-balanced car, both mechanically and aerodynamically, should show a fairly even temperature distribution between the front and rear tires. Significant differences in temperature can indicate understeer or oversteer tendencies. By using the live telemetry HUD while driving or analyzing telemetry afterward, we can even study temperature variations in slow, medium, and high-speed corners to identify mechanical or aerodynamic imbalances. A practical example: mechanical imbalances caused by suspension settings, pressures, camber, and toe are most noticeable in low-speed corners, where aero load is minimal and grip depends almost entirely on the car's mechanical setup. If one axle heats up significantly more than the other, it could indicate excessive stiffness in the springs or anti-roll bars, preventing the tires from making proper contact with the track. Aerodynamic imbalances caused by wing levels, rake, and aero balance become more apparent in medium and high-speed corners, where downforce plays a larger role in distributing load between the front and rear axles. If the front tires overheat much more than the rears, the car might be too rear-biased, with not enough front wing angle or a front ride height that's too high. Using the telemetry HUD to diagnose balance issues, a skilled driver can monitor real-time telemetry to see how tire temperatures change depending on corner speed and determine whether the issue is mechanical, only in slow corners, or aerodynamic, more noticeable in fast corners. But temperature balance isn't just affected by setup. Power delivery and driving style also play a role. Aggressive throttle application or high torque output can overwork the rear tires, increasing temperatures and causing rear-end instability. Braking technique and steering input can influence front tire temperatures, especially in cars with sensitive weight transfer. Optimal tire temperature and pressure windows in AMS2. Each car class in AMS2 has different optimal temperature and pressure ranges, which makes sense given the huge variety of categories and vehicles available in the sim. In real-world motorsport, tire manufacturers like Pirelli, Michelin, and Goodyear provide recommended values for each race. However, once on track, tire behavior can become an unpredictable variable that even the most advanced simulators or laboratory tests can't fully replicate. In Automobilista 2, tire models are based on the real-world series they emulate. And just to emphasize this once again, the temperature readings in the telemetry HUD refer to the tread level, the usable rubber between the contact patch and the tire's internal structure, the carcass. For cars like L, M, D, H, and GT3 Gen 2, the recommended central pressure is 2.0 bar, while GT3 Gen 1 and GT4 cars use a slightly different model with a central pressure of 1.9 bar. Unlike other simulators like ACC or LMU and AMS2, just like in real motorsport, there's no single magic ideal pressure value that works across all cars, conditions, and tracks. Instead, there's a recommended central pressure that serves as a baseline, balancing all key factors. Since pressures affect grip, cornering balance, traction, and rolling resistance, drivers are free to adjust them to their preferences. However, deviating too far from the recommended range can introduce negative effects that outweigh any potential benefits. Optimal tire temperature. Windows tread temperature windows vary depending on tire compound. In series where multiple compounds are available, track conditions determine the ideal choice. Softer tires work best in cooler conditions. Harder tires perform better in higher temperatures. For example, in LMDH cars, the soft, medium, hard compounds have optimal central temperature ranges of soft 70 degrees Celsius, medium 85 degrees Celsius, hard 100 degrees Celsius, in categories with only one compound, like GT3, GT4, and Porsche Cup. The optimal central temperature is around 90 degrees Celsius. What does optimal central temperature mean? The optimal central temperature refers to the ideal operating range where the tire delivers maximum performance. Once the tire reaches this window, performance stabilizes. It won't keep improving with more heat. However, if temperatures go outside this range, performance rapidly degrades. Most tire compounds allow for a tolerance of about 10 to 20 degrees Celsius above or below the ideal temperature before grip starts to drop significantly. Why staying in the optimal window matters? Keeping tires within their ideal temperature range is crucial for maximizing grip, maintaining consistent performance, preventing excessive overheating, which accelerates wear and reduces grip, avoiding excessive cooling, which lowers the tire's ability to generate grip. Putting AMS2 to the test. In the following test, we took the Alpine A424L MDH for a run at Laguna Seca with track temperatures around 50 degrees Celsius. In the first run, we set the tire pressures to the minimum and maxed out front camber at -5 degrees, while setting the rear camber to the lowest possible value, -1 degree. The combination, soft tires and 41 liters of fuel, enough for 20 laps, immediately highlighted the effects we've discussed so far, becoming evident after just 3 laps, 2 flying laps plus the outlap. Given the high temperatures and counterclockwise layout of Laguna Seca, it's no surprise that the right side tires were the most affected. However, the low cold pressures initially caused a significant increase in temperature on the inner and outer edges, leaving the center relatively cooler. This was particularly noticeable on the right rear, where the minimal camber setting reduced the temperature difference between the 2 outer sections. At the front, after just 4 laps, the aggressive camber angle created a large temperature gap across the IMO readings. Inner edge, 114 degrees Celsius middle, 104 degrees Celsius, affected by the low pressures. Outer edge, 101 degrees Celsius. This resulted in an overall temperature profile far outside the recommended range. At the end of the test, we reviewed the telemetry data and found results that were completely realistic given the setup parameters. The extreme camber settings had significantly reduced the contact patch in high-speed corners, clearly shown by the unbalanced IMO temperatures, while the minimum pressures worsened the situation by reducing tire stiffness, leading to a sharp rise in operating temperatures. The camber pressure graph confirmed this, showing that all 4 tires were heavily underinflated, staying well below the ideal value of 0 and nowhere near the target of 2.0 bar. By lap 4, the car had become extremely difficult to drive, with the tires completely outside their ideal window, making handling unpredictable. At this point, we made targeted setup changes to restore some balance to the tire temperatures. Front cold pressures increased to 1.53 bar. Rear cold pressures increased to 1.52 bar. Reduced front camber, increased rear camber. Although the lap time comparison speaks for itself, after just 3 laps with the new setup, the tire temperature distribution showed a significant improvement in both spread and peak values. The temperature delta between the 2 outer sections of the right front tire, the most stressed one, was now within the 10 degrees Celsius range, while the middle section sat perfectly between the 2 outer values, a strong indication that the pressures were, if not perfect, at least in the right ballpark. The right rear tire showed an even more balanced distribution, to the point that the 3 IMO sections were almost indistinguishable in the telemetry widget due to how evenly the heat was spread. Comparing the telemetry from both runs, white line representing the new setup, the improvement in pressures and IMO temperatures was clear and significant, though further fine-tuning could still be achieved with asymmetric settings. The camber pressure values were now close to the ideal target of 0, and the pressure graph showed an identical trend between the 2 runs, but with insufficient values in the first attempt. Finally, the temperature difference graph between the outer sections of the tires showed a major improvement, now staying mostly under 10 degrees Celsius at the front and under 5 degrees Celsius at the rear. As mentioned, there's still room for further optimization, but the gains were already substantial. It's fascinating to see how, despite the soft tires operating well outside their optimal central temperature window, which is around 70 degrees Celsius, the second setup, with properly adjusted camber and pressures, allowed for higher performance over a longer period, even with elevated operating temperatures. Before wrapping up, let's compare the 2 setups during lap 2 of the second run to better visualize the temperature values, distribution, and the handling difficulties caused when tires operate outside their ideal range. In conclusion, Automobilista 2 once again proves to be one of the most advanced simulators on the market, thanks to its incredible attention to detail in a highly realistic tire model. The depth of its camber, pressure, and temperature management closely mirrors real-world motorsport, providing virtual drivers with advanced tools to fine-tune setups and enhance their on-track performance. The integration of an advanced telemetry system, the IMO method, and realistic temperature windows showcase the outstanding work by Reza Studios. They've crafted an experience that is both rewarding and technically accurate, and with future patches introducing blistering and graining simulation, the level of realism and challenge will reach new heights. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to stay updated, and join the Università del Sim Racing community to share your passion for virtual motorsport.